Hi, I'm Richard Rogers, and I absolutely hope that you enjoyed today's spiritual message. You know, we at Unity of Phoenix Spiritual Center are committed to helping people live better lives. We're going to provide you tools over and over, spiritual tools that allow you to live your best possible life. And if you want to leave a donation to continue to allow the work that we do to support other people just like you, we say thank you. Thank you for your generosity, because this ministry is committed to making the world a better place.
So I want to talk tonight about your experience of God. And I want to see if tonight we can kind of separate your experience of God from your experience of life. Because sometimes they commingle. Like, have you ever had a bad experience? Nobody? Have you ever had a bad experience and then been mad at God because you had a bad experience? Right? So sometimes in our life, we commingle our experiences. And what I want to see if we can do is actually kind of separate those out. Because in the hardest times, in the most difficult times in our life, do we need more of an experience of God or less of an experience of God? More. And if you're running around mad at God in your difficult times, is that helping you or hurting you? Can anybody think of at least one time in your life where you've been mad at God? If you haven't, then I'll give you a couple of mine, right? Right? So most of us, maybe not the truly saints, but most of us humans, right, have from time to time something going on in our life, and we hold God 100% responsible. We didn't have anything to do with it. Right? Have you ever had one of those experiences where you had nothing to do with it? It was just God dropping it in your lap, and you were just a pure victim to circumstance, and it had nothing to do about the 100 choices you made to get yourself there, but it was God's fault that it showed up, right? And so what I want to talk about tonight is I want to talk about your experience, because what I know to be true is that there's an infinite number of experiences of God. But yet God is constant. God is constant. It's no respecter of personality. And that we can all have a different experience of God. Some of those can be more and more rewarding, but every one of us can experience God in a way that's totally unique to us. Right? My wife was raised in Michigan. And one of the things that I've noticed in the differences between us, being me raised in Southern California, is I have a low tolerance to cold water. and I'm assuming it's just a geographic thing, right? Because her uncle, she tells stories about her uncle would pay her brothers and sisters a quarter to jump in one of the Great Lakes, and it was like just above freezing. And for a quarter, when they were little kids, they would actually jump in the Great Lakes. How many of you are from Michigan and that makes sense to you? Okay, well, God bless you. See? In Southern California, if it wasn't July or August, we didn't go in the ocean unless we were wetsuited up to here. We just didn't do it. It was too cold. Nobody did it. Only the tourists did it. It wasn't, right? Unless you were wetsuited up, you did not do it. Right? But she has this ability to get into freezing cold rivers and lakes and find that so renewing. And I don't have that experience. I think there's like 1,000 million other experiences that I would rather have than that experience. So what I know to be true is that each one of us has our own experience. And what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about your experience of God, your experience of the divine. How do you experience God? And is that experience that you're having with the divine, with God, is that experience enough for you? Does it meet your soul needs? Or is your soul hungry for an even greater experience of God? Because I don't think there's anything worse in the world than having a soul that is hungry for more God and not knowing how to do it. Not knowing how to have that kind of a deep profound relationship. Because I want us to be satisfied, deeply, profoundly satisfied with our relationship with God. And in kind of in big terms, when we talk about our walk of faith, there's kind of, in my way of thinking, there's kind of 3 steps to our walk of faith. The first step in our walk of faith is, where we're a non-believer. We don't really believe that there's a presence and power of God, that we believe that I'm it, that I'm all I've got, and good luck, but that's it. And then the next step in our walk of faith is when we really do become a believer and we begin to believe that there's something more than ourselves. But I also believe that there's another step in our walk of faith, and that's when we move from believing to experiencing. Because once you experience the presence and power of God within you, once you experience that, it's no longer a level of belief, because now you know. And moving from believing to knowing changes our experience, because now we're not believing, we know God. And many of you, if you tell yourself the truth, you know God. You've had a direct experience with the presence and power of God. You know God. And if, one of the things that in Unity that we teach is that the Bible is our spiritual roadmap. That from Genesis through Revelation, it's our story of awakening. That in Genesis we read what happens when Adam and Eve feel kicked out and separated from God. And what happens when we feel that disconnect, when we feel that separation. And if we read Genesis, what we read is one of the experiences that we have when we feel disconnected from God, when we feel kicked out of the garden, is the consequences for Adam and Eve, is Adam would make his way by the sweat of his brow. Right? When we're in that place of feeling disconnected from God, then we are the only ones that we feel like we can count on to make our way through life. And we get through life through our own ability to control and manipulate and do hard work and whatever it takes. And we know that feeling of when Adam felt kicked out and the only way that he could get by, the only way he could get through a day was because of the sweat of his brow. And then one of the consequences for Eve was that childbirth was painful. From that point on in Scripture, childbirth was painful. And I want to look at that as more of a metaphor that when we feel separated or kicked out or separated from God, that life is hard and it's painful. And that over and over again, when we're living a life that's hard and painful, we know at some level we are feeling disconnected from the divine. And that's what we read in Genesis. But if we stay in that whole spiritual journey of the Bible, that we stay in the journey, there is a time when we move all the way through all the aspects, because every character, every situation, every story in the Bible is a part of our spiritual journey. It's a part of our experience. And then we get to Revelations, and then we have that experience of knowing complete oneness again. That we start from a sense of separation, and then if we engage the process fully, we come to a place of awakening where we know the oneness with God. And the thing that is the revolutionary piece is the piece in the middle. For the first part of the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, right? And then there's this experience when we move into the New Testament or the Christian Bible, where we have the experience of Christ, that Moses gave us the law, right? And Jesus taught us grace. And Moses taught us the law with the 10 Commandments. And who remembers any one of the 10 Commandments? They all start pretty much the same. And you remember how they start? Thou shalt not, right? That's the law, thou shalt not. And we think about it from a spiritual journey. It's like, well, why is that? Why would God say thou shalt not? Well, there's something that happens when we awaken to God in us, the Christ within, right? Because Jesus taught us grace, and he taught us the Beatitudes. And you know how the Beatitudes go? It's not thou shalt not, but it's blessed is he who, right? And so what happens is that's the distinction. in the Old Testament and the New Testament is thou shalt not. And what happens is Moses is trying to give us the boundaries, right? Because we haven't yet awakened to the Spirit of God within us. So Moses is trying to give us the boundaries so we don't go too far crazy, right? Thou shalt not kill. Good idea. Right? Like, and all the things that Moses is about is trying to keep us close to the line until we awaken to the Spirit of God within us. And then Jesus says, once we awaken to the Spirit of God within us, blessed is he who does this. Right? That it's not the idea that you're going to get punished if you do this, but you're going to be blessed if you do this. That one is based on don't do the wrong stuff, and one is based on do the right stuff and be more and more blessed, that live a blessed life, experience more and more God. And that is our spiritual journey in a nutshell, that we need to stay close. And we can all think of a time when we hadn't really experienced God, when we weren't really listening to our own soul, when we weren't really connected to the power within us, and we needed some guardrails because we were going fast the wrong direction, right? Nobody relates to that? Just me and Craig? That explains our whole teenage years, doesn't it? Right? And we were going the wrong direction. But then we began to awaken, right? And what I want to go further in is to talk about Jesus' experience of God. Because you can't really know somebody else's experience, but you can listen to their words and you can make some assumptions. And that's what I want to do tonight. I want to explore his relationship with God and use it as a roadmap for our experience of God. And so there is over 156 times, not that I counted, but I did look it up, over 156 times in the Gospel of John alone where Jesus calls God Father. Now, how many of you know that Jesus is called God Father? Right? Right? So that's not really a big learning tool, right? It's not always helpful. But in Scripture, in the Christian Bible, in the Bible that most of us are reading, the name, when they say God is Father, they are using the formal English term for Father. But what Jesus was actually speaking about was more like Papa. It was an intimate, sacred connection. It wasn't a formal relationship. It wasn't like a father that is the cranky father that we go to who's going to bring the heat if we made a mistake. What he's talking about is Papa. In Unity, what we've done for the last 100 years is we've looked at the idea of God as mother and father, and that can be helpful. But it's not so much the gender that I want you to see tonight as I want you to see the loving parent aspect of God. That whether you call it the masculine or the feminine, I don't care. But I want you to see that part of us that wants to know God as a completely loving, completely trusting, that we can love this intimate, caring God that's got us. Reading from Romans 8:15, which is always one of my favorites. This is actually Paul writing this about Jesus. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you received the spirit of sonship. When we cry, Abba, Father, it is the Spirit himself bearing witness to our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ. In the Gospel of Matthew, we read this. And then he went a little beyond them, and he fell to his face and prayed, saying, My Father, Abba, God, Papa, if it is possible to let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. See, I want you to really see this, right? So this wasn't a God that he was kind of coming into the world to try to appease and make happy and so that everything would be okay. This was Papa. This was a God that completely had his back. And he was vulnerable, right? He was vulnerable over and over again because in his mind, he was not doing his own will. He was doing the will of God. He was doing that which he was given to do. And so every day when Jesus got up to be the Jesus, to be the Messiah, to put on the Messiah outfit, right? He was completely vulnerable to what that day was going to bring. That sometimes when we look at the scripture, we begin to think that Jesus had this all figured out. I'm just going to blast in there for 3 years, kind of do my ministry. Then it's going to be kind of an ugly end, and then I'm going to get out. But then it'll be done. 3 years. I'm just in and out. Right? What I want you to see is that every day, his level of vulnerability, all he had was trusting his Pop. Every day, Pop, what do you want me to do? Every day, God, I'm just going to trust you right now and just take the steps you give me to do today. That every day from this place of vulnerability, he stepped into the Messiahhood. He stepped into his Christhood. He stepped into the fullness of God. And what's impressive about that for me is I know that all of us have stuff going on in our life that we would rather not have. We got stuff. We got issues. We got needs. We got problems. We got challenges. And there's a part of us that wants to let our ego figure it out and just manipulate the heck out of everybody to get all of our needs met. And we can do it that way. But that's not what Jesus did. What he did every day was to say, okay, Pops, what are we doing today? What are you asking of me today? How can I serve you today? What's the work we have today? And that's a level of vulnerability that most of us are in resistance to. Because that scares us. Because that would just take all the faith we have to live that vulnerable. And show up every day, in every situation, in every moment, and just say, I'm going to trust God right here. So if you tell yourself the truth tonight, where are the places in your life where you want to be smarter than life? Does everybody have at least one place where you're trying to figure it out so fast so that you can cover the spread and you won't get hurt and it won't be a problem and you can outsmart life and you cannot have to do it the hard way. You can do it any way you want to do it because you're smart enough that you can figure it out ahead of time and you can actually create your own path, and your path is going to be better than God's path because God's getting old and you can figure it out. Right? And what I wanted you to see tonight is what would happen if you just surrendered it all. What would happen today if you just walked in the level of vulnerability that all you get is trust? See, there's the spiritual walk that is tough, but it's real. It's honest. Where every day you show up and you say, okay, Pop, what are we doing? How do I handle this? How do I walk through that? How do I heal this? How do I transform that? And you just walk it with this nobleness, with this courage, with this faith that takes you to a new place. See, it's actually easier if you do it from your ego. It looks that way anyway, right? You don't really have to listen. You don't have to be vulnerable. The only question that you ask day in and day out is, what do I want? Right? And you just go do that. And sometimes it's not very rewarding because it's not deepening your experience of God. So here's what I want us to play with tonight. Let's go. That's what I want. Give me that one. So can we all agree that our spiritual life is about putting God in the center? Right? Can you, whether you like it or not, whether you want to do it or not, can we just agree that that's the focus of our spiritual life, is putting God in the center? Great. Now, let's go to the next one. So if we put in the God in the center, there's really two ways that most of us experience God. Either from the place of our mind or from our heart, right? Now, you know if you're a heart-centered person, and you know if you're a mind-centered person, right? And mind-centered people, not necessarily heart-centered people, and heart-centered people aren't necessarily mind-centered, and there's not one right way or one wrong way. It's just we're different. How many of you know that you tend to be more mind-centered? You tend to be more analytical, and you want to figure it out, and everything's got to make sense. How many of you know that you're just the heart-centered people, and it's one big heart, and you're just, yeah, you know it. Okay, great. So then we go from the mind, that the people tend to be very focused on spiritual principle. Like they want to understand it. So when you want to talk about spiritual principles or how many angels can dance on the head of a pin or anything like that you have to mentally figure out, this group is all in. They want to figure it out. They want to be smart. They want to understand spiritual principles. They want to know how to live it. They want to sometimes do it right? And then the heart people, Age of Aquarius, right? They're just into the experience, man. They're just grooving. It's all a big love fest, right? They're just into the love, right? They haven't had a new thought in a month, you know. They're just grooving, right? Right? Now, I'm making fun of you because I really am more one of you than I am, but all right? So then there's the mind and the heart. Okay, let's go to the next level, right? So there's thought and there's feelings, right? Are you with me on that one? Okay, let's go to the next one. Here's the problem. If you tend to be a thought-centered person, one of the things that you have to really be conscious of is your judgments. Because your brain wants to judge not only yourself, but everybody. Right? The way you stay safe, the way you feel powerful, the way you want to fix a problem is just judging the heck out of everybody. And if you're a thought-centered person, if you're on that side, the thing that you have to really be aware of is how much time and energy are you spending in judgment. And because most of us who are on that side, we love a good judgment. Right? We get to feel superior. We get to feel better. We get to know why they're having a problem in their life. If they just do this, they'd be fine. Right? When we're at this point, if we know that if we were king or queen of the universe, that everything would run smoother. Because we have just judged the heck out of everybody. All right? And you don't have to raise your hand, but I just want you to be mindful if judgment is your issue. Now, if you're not sure, ask anyone around you. Because they have felt the blessing of your gift, right? Right? Now, if you're a feeler, the problem is that life hurts, that there's pain. How many of you have experienced pain in this life already? Right? If you're a feeler, it's painful. It's hard. You can't watch the news. You can't, you old yeller just kind of puts you down for a week, you know. It's tough, right? Because it hurts. Your heart's wide open. It hurts. It's painful, right? So it looks like it's easier just to judge the heck out of everybody because then you don't have to have a feeling. But the reality is if you're a feeler, it's tough. Okay, so how do we move forward? Here's here's the practice. Here's your homework. If you're a judger, what I really want you to focus on to expand your relationship with God, to really feel more God in your life, I want you to focus on oneness. That we are more alike than we are not. I Googled the genetic code, the difference in the genetic code between a chimpanzee and a human is less than 3%. Man, you are so close. Right? Less than 3%. It's less than 3%. 3%, right? So when we want to get in our high and mighty, when we want to go there and we think that we should be king or queen of the universe, what I want you to see is, man, I'm that. The reason that that person annoys me so much is I'm that. And I want to judge them because I don't want to judge myself. I want to find their problem so I don't have to acknowledge my own pain. Right? And so if judgment is your issue over and over and over again, we have to be willing to build bridges to oneness. Now, on the pain side, in the presence of pain, the only choice we have is, do I want to forgive or do I not want to forgive? If I don't want to forgive, I just get to live in the pain a little bit longer. Because in the presence of pain, the only choice I really get is, am I going to forgive? Am I going to forgive myself? Am I going to forgive others so that I don't have to stay in the pain that hurts so bad? Let's go to the last one. Here's what I want you to see, the connection between both paths to God. Is the more we focus on oneness, guess where we come to? Love. The more we focus on forgiveness, guess where we come to? Love. That whatever your path is, that God is the beginning and love is the end. No matter what, God is the beginning and love is the end. If you want to cut to the chase, God is the beginning. Say it with me. God is the beginning and love is the end. And over again, that's what Jesus taught, that he had this relationship with God that was amazing. It was absolutely amazing, but it was always about going back to love. And that every time he taught over and over again, judge not and love your neighbors as yourself. That whatever your primary path to God is, what I want you to see tonight is, I don't want to talk you out of it. But I just want you to see the hurdles and the challenges and the problems. And I want you to see what I do with it. Because it's awful if you're living on the heart path and you won't get to forgiveness. It's awful. Because it's one painful day after another. Because you won't do your forgiveness work. And it's awful if you're living the mind path and you're not focusing on the oneness with all. Because you want to be superior to everybody. And that over and over again, when you live the path, there's this moment where you come back to yourself. Where you come back to God. Where you come back to love. So you ready? You ready for your homework? Okay, so tonight, I want you just to be aware of what is your primary path. Are you a mind person or are you a heart person? If you're a heart person, I want you to really do another forgiveness time about all the pain that you're still carrying with you. And if you're a mind person, I want you just to acknowledge where you're getting stuck in judgment. Because I just don't think it's working for you. Because it doesn't build relationship. It doesn't build connectionship. It doesn't lead you into a greater experience of God. That over and over again, Jesus knew God as Papa. That he could just count on. He could count that his dad had his back. And that whatever he was going through, that his God would guide him and direct him and be with him always. That no matter how hard it got, no matter how painful or scary it got, his dad had him. And that's what I want for all of us. I want you to have such a deep, profound experience of God that whatever you're walking through tonight, you know your dad's got you. And that in that experience, it gives you the faith and the courage to take the next step. Will you pray with me? I invite you to open your mind, your heart, your soul to the activity of God that is right here. And that whatever our work is tonight, whether it's oneness, whether it's forgiveness, that we clear the path for a greater experience of God. That we see the oneness in all life. And that we do the forgiveness work that we need to do to release the pain. That tonight, God, we want to walk in your light. We want to trust you with everything. So in the name and through the power of the living Christ, we give thanks. And so it is. Amen.